Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is available now. Uncover one of history's greatest mysteries in a first-person single-player adventure game set between the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. The year is 1937. Sinister forces are scouring the globe for the secret to an ancient power connected to the Great Circle, and only one person can stop them. Indiana Jones. Adventure Calls on Xbox Series X and S, Game Pass, and PC. Rated T for Teen. Copyright and trademark 2024 Lucasfilm Limited. All rights reserved.
From hobby farmers to weekend gardeners and everyone in between, Tractor Supply trusts 5G solutions from T-Mobile for Business to make shopping more personal. Together, we're connecting over 2,200 stores with 5G business internet and powering AI so team members can match shoppers with products faster.
You're all set.
This is enriching customer experience. This is Tractor Supply with T-Mobile for Business. Take your business further at T-Mobile.com/now.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, for decades, the mysterious death of a nuclear power whistleblower has fascinated the public. Now, a pair of veteran reporters get their hands on new evidence that might crack the case. We'll review the podcast Radioactive, the Karen Silkwood Mystery. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
I like your plaid, Kevin.
Thank you. Everybody does in podcast land.
Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, the person who coordinated clothing with Kevin Flynn this week, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca. Yeah, Kevin and we're in the flannel season here.
Is yours from LL Bean also?
No, I don't even know where mine is from. It's like an off-brand flannel, but I really like it.
It's like the Bob's Furniture flannel?
It's like my Bob's massage chair, which we'll talk about later.
It's a very autumnal color scheme here, yeah.
Yeah.
And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, the author of the City Trilogy, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Got left out of the flannel conversation, apparently.
Same. I was not told.
Yeah.
Absolutely not told.
Tis the season, Toby. Tis the season.
You guys got to need to check the Slack more.
I do have a fleece vest, which I think is sort of the 1B for New Hampshire fall wear.
Yeah, if you have a fleece vest and Blundstones, you're basically wearing the New Hampshire uniform. Is kind of how it works. All right, so Kevin, this is Thursday's podcast.
It is.
What's coming up on Monday's show?
Yeah, Monday we're going to talk about the documentary series on Netflix, The Kings of Tupelo.
I cannot wait to hear Toby talk about that documentary.
Oh, why is that?
We got to watch it early for the Netflix podcast I host, and the entire time I was watching it, I couldn't help but think, I wonder what Toby would say about this part. I wonder what Toby would say about this part.
Well,
it's one of those, Toby.
Gotta wait a week. I guess
You're either
we'll
going
find
to love
out.
it or hate it, and I have a guess as to which one it's going to be.
All right. Well, I feel like that's hate it. So
no,
I'm looking forward to it. You think I'm going to love it?
I am predicting the other way. I don't know
All
what
right.
you think.
Well,
Kevin.
we'll see.
It's crazy. It's got crazy
wild.
twists. Yeah,
it's wild. It's pretty much a wild one. All right. So, Kevin, we have a podcast to talk about that kind of harkens back to the origins of audio storytelling. Should we get to that?
Yeah, sure. Let's rewind the reel-to-reel tape.
All right. Leading off.
We were concerned that she was going to get fired. That was the worst thing that we thought could possibly happen. That was about the limit. That was where we were wrong.
In 1974, Karen Silkwood wanted to blow the whistle on the nuclear fuel plant where she worked. Armed with documentation about insufficient safety measures, radiation leaks, and unaccounted for plutonium, Silkwood drove to meet an investigative reporter. But on her way, she was killed when her car went off the road, an accident some believed was caused by the powerful company hoping to silence her.
There's never been a definitive answer. Both sides told a very different story that night of what happened, and as her son, I would like to have a definitive answer of what really took place.
Though police said they believe Silkwood fell asleep at the wheel, the mysterious nature of her crash continues to fascinate the public and haunt her family. But now, 2 reporters who've spent decades covering the story believe they've discovered newly revealed evidence that could shed light on what happened on State Highway 47.
Yeah, it's all here. Holy mackerel.
This is what we'd been looking for, hoping for. Cassette tapes recorded in the 1970s. Interviews a private investigator had made looking into a mysterious death.
The death of Karen Silkwood.
In Radioactive, the Karen Silkwood Mystery from ABC Audio and Standing Bear Entertainment, hosts Bob Sands and Mike Boettcher break down the story and use modern techniques to analyze the wreck for evidence her car was run off the road. They also reveal long-hidden audio tapes about those who may be responsible for the death of nuclear power's most famous whistleblower. Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from Radioactive, so if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes to get our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So Kevin, before we kicked off this conversation, I mentioned that this was a little bit of an old school, going back in time podcast situation. I wasn't talking about the story. I was talking about the 2 dudes hosting it.
Oh my God, Rebecca.
No, they both say they're old-timey radio reporters, Kevin.
Yes.
And it brings you...
You don't have to call out the boomers?
You're the one who called out the boomers. What did you think about the journalistic style and storytelling in this podcast?
Oh man, well you gotta love 2 old reporters, according to Rebecca, who knew Marconi personally.
I didn't say that.
Yeah, these
you
guys...
You just said that.
No, you make it sound like they've been hanging out with Edward R. Murrow.
No, but I'm saying they were working long before podcasts existed.
Sure.
And they sound in this sometimes like they're still doing a radio news story.
Well, I know at least one of them was in, I think they both were in radio, but certainly the dude who was like trying to get holding up the microphone, trying to get the sound of bullets whizzing by and that standoff from 1970, whatever. I mean, that's great.
Mike and I met as young reporters at competing Oklahoma news outlets. We were both on the scene of a hostage situation back in 1973. Bullets were whizzing past our heads. I dove off the end of a flatbed trailer, and what does this crazy character do? He stood there holding a microphone in the air trying to catch the sound of the bullets flying by.
So they've got audio chops already, so whether or not they're using their iPhone or they've got like some legit professional gear, they kind of know how to put this together and they know how to throw themselves into it, right? We don't have somebody who is like a YouTube influencer poking around asking like stupid conspiracy questions. I mean, these are 2 guys who are not only like, veteran reporters, but veterans to this story. So they bring a lot to it. If there was anything more that I would like to hear, we hear just a little bit, but I would like to hear way more of their banter interaction with each other, driving places and stuff. There was the one thing like, well, we could have taken a plane. But like, if they have a 50-year plus relationship, like use it.
Yeah, I actually felt the same way. The style of their voices too, and this isn't bad. I'm just saying, they sound like 2 broadcast radio dudes. Like they really, really do. What did you think about the style of the show, Toby?
Well, I was sort of more focused on, they kind of follow the model of follow us while we do an investigation, which, it's been used by a lot of people. But this seemed like a particular case of that since, a lot of stuff has already been done on it. So there's a little bit of sort of bringing you up to speed with what had actually happened and what people know with the, idea that by the end they will have new evidence to kind of give you, which they may or may not. I don't want to give away the rest of this podcast.
One of my favorite things was the asides they would drop about their careers. Like one of them was a PI. And he dropped his aside. He's like, I once investigated Bill Clinton and Benjamin Netanyahu. I'm like, what are you fucking talking about? Can we stop the podcast and you can just tell that story, please? Because I have no idea what you're talking about. But Laura, at the center of this, of course, we have Karen Silkwood. Her story made nationally famous by the news coverage of what happened to her, but then again by the Meryl Streep movie made about her. How do you feel about the Karen that we hear about in this story? Because we actually hear from Karen in this story.
I mean, the first thing I'm going to say, she's like kind of reminded me, she's like the Erin Brockovich of her day. Like she's somebody that is like feisty and she's going to fight against the big company, but she's like 100 pounds and 5'4". She's like a teeny woman. She's somebody that's just like a normal employee there. And she's standing up to this giant atomic energy company. Right from the beginning, we know that she's not only standing up to them, she's been collecting evidence and collecting information that she's planning to go turn over to the New York Times. So she's like a woman after my own heart. I was like, go Karen. But we hear about her through her family members, through her son, who was kind of heartbreaking that his really only memory of her, he kind of conflated her with Meryl Streep because he was young.
I think it's about what I missed, like what the could-haves, what could have been affects me more than actual sadness of losing her, because I don't have any memories of us together. So it's not like, gosh, I missed that and gosh, I missed that. It's
take your time. It's okay.
My heart knows there's a hole there.
She had this weird divorce where like she actually left her children because she knew that her ex-husband could give a better environment to them at the time. So I think we had all the right voices to bring her to life, from the people that she worked with to, the guy that was like her union guy in the company that is still very dedicated to finding out what happened to her. But I appreciate anybody that's got that much feist and is willing to go out and fight the man like she did.
So, Toby, Karen's story isn't really like a environmentalist story like Erin Brockovich's story. It's a labor story, right? What did you think about what we heard, Toby, about how this plant was run? No security, shifts being run by teenagers who came from farms, and absolutely no understanding, seemingly, of the dangerousness of the product that they're handling.
Yeah, well, there's sort of a class action park aspect to this where she says you've got these teenagers sort of quote unquote running the place, and they just, I think it's partly because I don't think people really understood how dangerous radioactive materials were back then and how their toxicity levels. So you have these like teenagers playing these games like, let's see how hot you can get on the Geiger counter by handling this plutonium, and then like wanding yourself.
Now, what about this getting to these kids joking about getting hot?
In the laboratory, we've got 18 and 19-year-old boys.
Farm kids Kermagee had hired with hardly any training. She said she'd watched some of them playing around with plutonium to see who could get hot or contaminated the quickest.
And I assume Kermagee must have known about the health dangers of all this stuff and just weren't that concerned about it. So she's in a situation that workplace safety is not only just sort of non-existent, but it's almost the opposite in that people are doing dangerous things for fun. I think later in the show, they talk about people storing plutonium in desk drawers. I mean, it's kind of ripe for a union to come in and be like, what the fuck is going on here?
Yeah.
You're handling the most toxic shit known to man, and there's no safety controls. You've got these kids who are in charge of dealing with these materials, and people are going to die. They're either going to die right away or they're going to die later of cancer, but people are going to die.
This would make a really great episode of The Office. Forget the stapler and the Jell-O. It's there's some plutonium in the coffee creamer.
Yeah, and only one smart person working there, which is Karen Silkwood, right? She dropped out of college. She always had a science mind, though, and when this job came up, she's like, oh, I can use my interest here. But she's also obviously very smart, very brave to kind of like stand up against the man. But it does appear, whether or not you believe she was run off the road, that there was some retaliation going on. But whether or not that crosses over with her contamination is a big question in the podcast. Kevin, there are a couple of scenes in this podcast where, of course, everybody remembers, if they've seen Silkwood, the shower scene. Mm-hmm. They describe the showers as being way fucking worse in this podcast than we saw in the movie. In the movie, we saw the brushes, we saw the thing, and it was like one scene. Mm-hmm. She had this multiple times. Her skin was like falling off of her body. They used bleach and Tide to clean her up. And then she still ends up with plutonium on her bologna and cheese in her refrigerator.
Yeah. I mean, okay, a lot going on here. Let's unpack that. Yeah. How the fuck does plutonium wind up at your house? That is a great question. But, if people are sticking it in your drawers at the desk, then, maybe someone would put it in your bologna.
Putting it in your pea canister that you go home with.
I mean, it's also apparently, not out of the question that she just picked it up by accident, but that it got stuck to her, and she obviously somehow she brought it home, right? Or the theory be like they planted it and they gave it to her, put it in her house to scare her or whatever. I mean, I don't think anyone thinks that Karen was bringing it home to sort of like fake an emergency.
No.
Right? Because if you want to like irradiate yourself to make a point about safety, you would do it at the plant.
Right.
Right? You wouldn't like go home and like, come back the next day radioactive and then go home and come back the next day radioactive, especially after getting what we've always called the Silkwood shower.
Right.
To find out that it isn't like your coworkers scrubbing you down with Fuller brushes and it's so painful.
You're being pressure washed.
But it's more than it's like next time like grab an SOS pad and then when you're in the shower and start rubbing, right? They're trying to rub the top layer of skin cells
Which
off
apparently
you.
is a terrible idea because then the plutonium can get into
Even
your body.
worse, right. But imagine being like, oh, let's do that again tomorrow. It's just
Remember when you were radioactive, Kevin?
I was.
God.
There was one scene in this documentary that reminded me of that because they were like, she had to bring in urine and fecal samples and they're like, just bring in the samples. I'm like, no, don't bring in the samples. Just do that somewhere else in some toilet nobody else uses. I felt so bad for Karen's poor roommate who had to live with this person that's peeing radioactive pee and pooping radioactive poo in their toilet. Like, Kevin, you and I weren't allowed to use the same toilet when you were radioactive.
That's true.
Yeah.
I thought the theory was that there was actually radioactivity in the little sample things that they got.
There was. That was the
there
theory.
was also, it was spiked. Yes.
So whether she may not have been peeing and pooping radioactivity, she may have just been peeing into a radioactive dish.
Right, but her nasal swabs would come back with radioactivity as well. She wasn't snorting plutonium.
Well, that's what you think.
You get the best high.
Yeah. So, Laura, we did actually listen to another podcast at one point about a guy who was in danger at a plant, right? An industrial situation. You made a note about that. Do you want to talk about that?
So this reminded me of the season of Accused with our podcast colleague Amber Hunt in the Fernald nuclear plant out in Ohio, in Cincinnati, which I remember because my uncle was the workplace safety guy there. He was like the in-house OSHA guy.
Oops.
And I know. And he's always been very concerned that he was exposed to something. But, it just reminded me, in that case, we had the guy who fell into like the giant vat and like just like disintegrated.
Allegedly.
Which was very disturbing. But the same thing, it's like, I feel like there's just something when you have the setting of a nuke plant, there's always this feeling that something might be going awry, that there's something happening behind the scenes, or maybe that's just me, but maybe it's because I live close to the nuke plant.
Laura, it's because there are literally cracks in the containment unit at the plant you live near. That's why.
Yeah, I know. And they get the seals. The seals were getting sucked into the fans. But yeah, I think there's something, if you are a journalist, looking into any situation that happens at a nuke plant is ripe for investigating, I think.
So, Toby, there is a story here about corporate malfeasance also, I think, on the scaring Karen Silkwood side. And lest anybody think that this is like something that doesn't really happen, it happens all the time. Like firms like Black Cube, this is what they do. They get people to stop doing the whistleblowing activity or the lawsuit activity or the thing they're doing by scaring them or by threatening them or by making their lives awful. And of course, there's a lot of questions about the recent Boeing whistleblower who was shot in his car the day before he was going to testify on that case. But I'm not saying Boeing killed him. I'm saying there's a lot of conversation about it. But so, Toby, while I don't buy necessarily that she was killed by a bad actor, I do kind of like the theory, though, that it may have been an accident as a result of her being tailed. I do think she was being tailed, and I do think she was being intimidated. What do you think?
Yeah, the facts or the allegations sort of seem like 70s or 80s thriller about a whistleblower that I guess they probably got him from this, but having cars follow you, supposedly the radioactive pee dishes, the troubling radioactive tests. There's all these sort of intimidation type things that she's being subjected to. And some of them, like she goes to Los Alamos, I think, to get checked out for her high levels of radiation. They're like, okay, you're fine. Like, just chill. But
so reassuring.
Yeah, no worries. But it does, it clearly takes a toll. I can't remember who says it, but somebody says they went to see her and she seemed very ill. She'd lost weight, seemed very drawn and pale, probably hadn't been sleeping. And the assumption at the time was that this was radioactivity poisoning, but I think in fact it was probably stress.
Stress and Quaaludes.
Stress and Quaaludes. It's a good combo that she's having. Is affecting her physically.
Yeah.
Speaking of physically, $5 physical dollars. Actually, it's not even physical dollars. It's electronic.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Yes.
Talk about a nuclear reaction.
Yes. I guess we're in the business section suddenly.
Yeah. Toby split that atom and
The half-life on that is forever,
Yeah,
Toby.
it just exploded in all directions and everyone's infected.
Yes.
Everyone's infected. Yeah, you won't melt down if you join us on Patreon.
Oh, okay.
At patreon.com/partners in crime media. There you get to support this podcast directly, be a sustainer, and keep us going into 2025.
That's right.
Remember, if you do an annual membership, you can save 10%.
Ooh.
Drop it all at once. Pay it all at once. It's just a fraction of the cost.
Amazing.
I'm not good with fractions, so I don't really know, but
Is there a gift option for Patreon? Can people gift Patreon to each other?
You check out, go to Patreon, and I don't know how to do it myself, but yes, you definitely can. This is a new thing that they've rolled out where you can.
We've never gifted anybody yet.
I never gifted. Yeah, you can give them the gift of Patreon. Maybe there's that person at work who's just like, yeah, I like Crime Writers On, but I never get to listen to Laura Bricker's Leave It to Bricker podcast or Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast.
Or maybe there's a Karen Reed case like fanatic in your life who would love to hear the readathon.
Yeah. Or, you could buy somebody else, for a different podcast, but why would you do that?
Pick ours.
You could do that. You'd be like all the great stuff that you can listen to, like the aforementioned Leave It to Bricker podcast, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast, the Crime Writers On After Show, Married with Podcast, the Advice Podcast, and Rebecca's Readathon, which covers the Karen Reed case. I know
the Canton corruption case.
I know you were gonna when you had to say Karen Silkwood. I know that the other Karen's name was right on the tip of your tongue. You also can support us a lot of other ways this holiday season. If you need to do some shopping, and who doesn't? You can do some Christmas shopping by stopping. The first stop on Amazon should be our Amazon storefront, where you can see all of our amazing favorite things and then continue on with the rest of your shopping. Rebecca, what are this week's Crime Writers On Amazon recommendations?
Well, Kevin, after I burnt the shit out of my hand this weekend, picking up a cast iron pan with a oven mitt that had completely melted through in the middle, I went on to Amazon to look for some new oven mitts, and they had quite the selection.
Was it plutonium? It sounded like that you grabbed a bunch of the...
No, it was like the middle of the oven mitt had sort of like melted out. It was a really good oven mitt that sort
There's
of had
only one
become
way
destroyed.
to know that.
There's only one way to figure that out, and that's to pick up a cast iron pan off the stove and realize you're burning the shit out of your hand. So yes, I went on Amazon. I ordered a small, like mini pair, the kind that fits over your hand that you just use for pans, and then I got the big glove kind. Like the surgical giant glove kind.
Like you're working in that box, right?
Yes, I'm working in that box in case there's something deep in the oven that you need to pull out. I have those now, thanks to Amazon.
Yeah, all those former employees at Kerr McGee now, they could get the long oven
If only
mitts.
they'd had those. Only those 18-year-olds had those.
Yeah, so you can reach all the way to the back of the oven. And, Toby Ball, you have a great list. It's the listener-inspired Toby Ball's Deep Cut recommendations. What are your deep cut recommendations?
Well, we've got the Kerr McGee shower curtain lining, 72 inches. No, that's not actually
the Kerr
true.
McGee loofah?
Yeah, so this will be a little more interactive than sometimes they are. Interpreting the Masters Volume 2. Which master do you think is being interpreted in Volume
Beethoven.
2 of the Interpreting the Masters series?
Then it would be Bach.
Interpreting the Masters, Volume 2.
Tiger Woods?
Tiger Woods.
This is music, right? This is a music book,
Bach.
right?
Oh, okay. I
He's
thought it might
his
be like
guess.
golf
Oh,
masters.
okay.
The Masters, yeah.
Is it a music book?
I'll give you that. It's a music
Okay.
book.
I'm going to say the Rolling Stones.
Well, that's a little closer than Bach. It's Van Halen. A tribute to Van Halen. It may not be a book. It may be somebody doing Van Halen covers. I don't know what it is. It just says
Right now.
Wow. And they're
right
only Volume
now,
2.
Good Lord, woman.
What?
My God.
That was a Van Halen song, wasn't it?
Sort of.
Yes, but like of all the ones,
I know. I just was
Jamie's crying.
picking a random one. I was trying
Panama.
to keep it tight. Wait, if I had said Panama, he would have done the same fucking thing. I guarantee it.
Panama?
Panama.
Oh, come on.
Are you a
Were
Sammy?
you born in like 1995?
Are you a Sammy fan?
Oh my God.
no.
Or a David Lee Roth
Wait,
fan?
stop. Is Toby Ball making critical commentary about other people's pop cultural
knowledge?
literacy? Come on.
Yeah, fuck you, Toby.
Fuck you, Toby.
Have you watched the sex tape?
He hasn't even seen Titanic, for fuck's sake.
Yeah.
Van Halen's not in
Interpreting the Masters.
Titanic. I don't know.
No,
I don't know
Celine Dion is in
what does this even have to
Titanic.
do with anything? All right, I'm going to try and keep this thing freaking tight from now on.
All right. No, don't. Let's draw it out.
There's two funny adult humor, embarrassing gag gifts, silly, inappropriate T-shirts. One...
Could you read that again? What's the intro?
The silly, raunchy, inappropriate thing on it, what it says. The other one doesn't. It just says that it's embarrassing and it's a gag gift and it's silly and inappropriate. So I'll pick the one that doesn't have anything to say on it. And that's the thing.
I want to hear the other one. What does it say on it?
What does the T-shirt say?
You want to hear what the T-shirt says? All right, listen. Yes. Send all complaints to Kevin P. Flynn at AOL.com. I look better bent over.
Oh my God, it's like my gingerbread man.
I don't even want to fucking know what you're talking about.
You guys didn't see that when you came to my house. My little gingerbread man is getting it like that.
I look better. No, but by the way, sorry, dude, no one looks better bent over. But anyway, incredible.
Better to me. All right, that's amazing.
That's so amazing.
Yeah, so to get all those high class...
Wait. Can you imagine wearing that to like the grocery store? Wouldn't that be incredible? Like, wear that to Market Basket, just push your cart around.
Rebecca, you saw some kid wear a shirt that said, I heart hot moms, and you had to buy it for yourself.
Yeah, I have that one now.
Yeah, remember to shop us first at amazon.com/shop/CrimeWritersOn. We earn commissions on all qualified and stupid purchases.
Kevin Flynn.
Yeah.
Before we wrap up this very elucidating business section, do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Jess Lomas and Lauren Hopkins. Bless you.
Bless you, Jess.
And Lauren knows why she got picked. She's a wonderful person.
Bless you, Lauren. Bless you, Jess.
Jess is too, I'm sure.
I'm sure she's wonderful. I actually am on Team Jess now because you just made Lauren feel really good and Jess felt terrible. So, Jess, I'm on your team. Thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. Thanks to everybody who ever has supported us on Patreon. Maybe buy it for a gift for someone or just, increase your membership by a little. I don't know. But thank you for being there for us. Kevin, does thus end our business section?
Thus ends the business section.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and bend over right now.
The fucking hell.
Can we be done now?
We're done.
Toby, block your eyes.
I'm fading that music out.
Indiana Jones and the Great Circle is available now. Uncover one of history's greatest mysteries in a first-person single-player adventure game set between the events of Raiders of the Lost Ark and The Last Crusade. The year is 1937. Sinister forces are scouring the globe for the secret to an ancient power connected to the Great Circle, and only one person can stop them. Indiana Jones. Adventure Calls on Xbox Series X and S, Game Pass, and PC. Rated T for Teen. Copyright and trademark 2024 Lucasfilm Limited. All rights reserved.
So, Toby.
Yep.
Who's our next sponsor for this program?
Toby doesn't know.
Oh, he doesn't?
He doesn't. Why would you be asking him?
That's a good point.
Yeah, okay, so we're sponsored by our friends over at Quince.
Oh, my fave.
Yeah, why is gift giving so enjoyable?
Because it feels good to have people open stuff that they like.
Yeah, right, so I'm sorry, that was a rhetorical question that I was supposed to answer. Like, why is it enjoyable for me? Because I'm kind of bad at giving gifts.
You're very bad at it.
So, to have a nice prompt for something, especially when it comes to clothing, because I think as a dude, we can agree that it's sometimes hard to pick out, really great stuff. But it's all, what makes a great outfit is not just something that looks good on you, but a little bit of luxury, right? So you get quality gifts at an affordable price for Quince. Now, as much as I like giving gifts, I like giving myself stuff.
You also like getting gifts.
I like getting gifts. You know what I just did? I bought a pair of joggers from Quince.
You love those
for under
joggers.
$50.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've never had joggers before, and so they really like how they fit and they look. But Quince has a whole bunch of stuff for under $50. It is perfect for the holiday season. Plus, it's really quality stuff.
Gift luxury this holiday season without the luxury price tag. Go to quince.com/crime.
Crime!
For 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crime.
Crime!
To get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime.
Crime.
At Capella University, we believe accessible education can make a difference. That's why we offer scholarship opportunities to all eligible students. Un futuro diferente está más cerca de lo que crees con Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
All right, Kevin. So these two older investigative reporters are
the same guys that stormed the beaches at Normandy. Is that what you're going to say?
No.
Poor guys.
One of them has a tape that he wasn't allowed to play any of until certain people were dead. And he's had that tape for a very freaking long time.
Yeah.
All right? Who I'm saying, this guy is probably your age, really.
Oh, kiss my ass.
Were you a reporter in the 90s, yes or no?
Yeah, not in the 70s, but yeah.
All right, so.
Yeah, but I have a photo that they sent over of him working the reel-to-reel player.
Are they silver foxes, these two?
Oh, yeah, they're great, yeah. But I'm also looking, I'm like, I bet you they're the only people that they know today that would know how to lace up a reel-to-reel player.
Yeah, and I just want to say, I'm not saying they're older as a insult. I think that there's too many young people in podcasting. And we need to let in the olds, and I'm glad this podcast did it. So, Kevin.
Bob and Mike, it's at Reb Lavoie.
They promise us, Bob and Mike promise us, these investigative tapes, these old tapes that they're not allowed to play until someone's dead. They also find Karen Silkwood's frickin' bumper in some lady's garage.
Yeah.
Do all of these old things that are finally getting exposed to the light of day, do they actually fill in any holes in the case?
Yeah, I mean, they do to a certain extent. I mean, it certainly, advances some of it. The tapes that they have, not the ones of Karen, which we hadn't heard before.
Those are great.
The ones, with this interview, this PI talking to certain people like that cop.
And the secretary.
But you do know that they were doing illegal wiretaps at that time. And that's important.
No, I won't say they were. I said I think they were.
Yeah, well, at least you were transcribing telephone conversations with two parties on the conversation.
Right.
That neither one of the parties were police officers, right?
I'll say that over the phone, but I won't say it in court.
I think the only thing that really proves is that the police department had surveillance equipment that they probably shouldn't have had. Because I don't think they really nailed down that it was used on Karen or what that means. Sort of the idea, well, everybody knew about this. Sounds more like gossip to me.
Whiskey talk.
Whiskey talk.
My new favorite expression.
I don't think it's a fault of the reporting at all that in the end they don't nail this down, because we are talking about a 50-year-old mystery, and I think we should talk about the accident reconstruction, but we should probably also talk about like whether or not we think that it was probable that they ran him off the road. I mean, I feel like for me, you have to believe again. I mean, Toby's the captain of Everything Cynical, but I'm pretty cynical about all these conspiracy podcasts, which is that you would have to believe that they wanted to kill her and were just able to pick an opportune time on an abandoned highway to do it.
I don't think they wanted to kill her.
You think they were just following her, and maybe she fell asleep? Like both things are true.
No. She didn't fall asleep. I think they clipped her, and that they didn't realize that would kill her.
Right, but you listened to the last episode of the podcast, right? There's no evidence of.
There's also no evidence that it didn't happen.
But I think what's hard about this is that, because I usually be like, yeah, this is a bunch of bullshit, conspiracy theory, like staying up all night listening to Coast to Coast AM. No, here's the thing.
So specific.
Well, I know. Coast to Coast AM radio, that like super conspiracy theory thing.
Yeah.
I think what's interesting about this one is that you have so many people involved that are legitimate, that believe the real story's not out there. You have like police investigator, you have the private investigator, you have the union guy who's like old and he's collecting all this information. You have all these people. Like there's something there. But what's so frustrating is like, we are never going to know, I don't think, what is actually there. We can surmise, like you said, Rebecca, like.
Unless someone confesses, right?
Unless someone confesses. Like, I'm like, okay, was she like super nervous because she's like going to the New York Times, and so she's like on edge already and she's just not paying attention, and then whoop, she crashes her car. Who knows? But I think the fact that there's so many people involved that have legitimate investigative backgrounds all questioning it, and all holding on to it for decades. That's the part that is like really sticks with you about this story.
What do you think, Toby?
Well, it seems to me like it's really about the timing. You know, if it had happened some other day when she wasn't going to meet a New York Times reporter and turn over all this information, like I think people wouldn't be as conspiratorially minded. But the fact that this prevented her from doing that, and that all this information that she was supposedly going to hand over, nobody found, I think that kind of leads one to believe like this couldn't be a coincidence. Like why this night of all nights? But I think the alternative is she's under the most possible pressure at that moment too. So her misinterpreting things that are happening around her and taking evasive action from something that's not actually there. All you've got is speculation, right? Because even when then, I guess we're going to talk about the sort of forensic investigation of the bumper, but it ends up sort of not ruling anything in or out. It's just sort of like, well, we can't really tell much from this. So it just sort of continues. It's just like whatever you want to read into it, you can kind of read into it. But I think there's no question that there's a campaign of intimidation against her. And so I think even if you can't say for sure whether it was a car that ran her off the road or clipped her or whatever, I think it's hard to argue that a campaign of intimidation was not at least partially responsible for her ultimate death. I mean, I think it's hard to get away from that. So, like, I'm happy to freaking roast Kerr McGee over the coals just for that.
Right.
I mean, nobody's going to go to jail for this, right? So I think you can make the connection, and they have culpability.
Anybody besides me disturbed that 40 pounds of plutonium went missing from that plant and that no one was allowed to talk about it? Anyone else worried about that besides me?
Yeah. And how about their
Not at
excuses
all,
like,
Rebecca.
no, it's just here.
There's nothing to see here, Rebecca.
It's just in the pipes.
It's in the, yeah, it's just everywhere.
It's just 40 pounds. What is that, like a fist size?
I don't know.
They're stocking stuffers.
There's like a piece of plutonium the size of a grain of sand can like power a city for a week or some shit like that.
I feel like there's like that's certainly not the first time I've heard about like an alarming amount of highly processed uranium or plutonium missing from things. Like it seems like that pops up every once in a while. People are like, oh, we got to figure it out. And then nobody figures it out and nobody thinks about it again.
Maybe Putin stole it to poison those people. You know how he's always poisoning them with, what is that, the other radioactive stuff called? You like that? Polonium is what he's poisoning.
Yeah, I feel like the Russians have their own situation with that.
Yeah,
they do.
They don't have to come over and get ours.
Yeah.
They absolutely do.
From Karen Silkwood.
So there's a big question for me at the end of the podcast, and I see that you've all kind of addressed it. So I want to kind of go around the horn on this. Laura, it's arguable that we don't know more at the end than we knew at the beginning, even though we got a really detailed telling of the story. We heard from Karen, who we haven't heard from before. We heard some details. We had some characters we never heard from before and some voices. But the story, I could say, does not advance appreciably. Does that matter in a podcast like this?
This is hard because I feel like at the end I was like, okay, so we don't actually know what happens. We have this 2-hour Zoom call that they have with the expert. They have all the family members there of Karen, of the investigators that were involved. And then the guy finishes and they're all just silent.
2 hours later, Steve pressed pause on his PowerPoint and opened it up for questions and reaction. People's faces were drawn. This didn't seem to be the definitive closure we were hoping for. There was this uncomfortable pause where no one said anything.
I was like, that's it? At the end, I did come to be like, I can reconcile this as a journey style podcast because, you know, we've got these two older reporter guys and this is a story that got away. This is a story they were younger. They said we didn't have the chops to investigate it. They followed every thread on that. They finally called the guy who made the secret tapes that they'd been holding on to until people died. And that guy's like, I know why you're calling. I'm like, oh my God, I would have listened to the tapes even though I wasn't calling him before then. You know, we have at the end the question between like the daughter asking the daughter of the other family member, like, how do you feel about this? So I think there were human connections made in this. It is frustrating. And I think if I was one of those family members, I would probably be very frustrated because it feels like there was so much hope that this was going to lead to new information. But really, they fleshed out every past bit of information. They found all the people that were still around. And you could see the hold that this case had on all of them. But at the end, I was just like, it was frustrating, but I was still okay with like, okay, it was interesting.
That's a really good question, Rebecca. I hadn't really sort of thought about that. Like, is it still a worthwhile journey to go on this, even if...
Dude, we've been roasting Someone Knows Something for like 7 years.
Well, I was just thinking about, like, the last week we did Inside McCamey Manor.
Right.
And we were all over the, quote, journalism in that because it's like, hundreds of people have gone through this haunted house. Could you find more than 2 of them?
Oh, my God, yeah.
And so I think in one way it's like, you look at this and you're like, well, what else could these guys possibly do? Like, you can't fault them for not turning over every rock and then the rocks under the rocks, So you can't get that. Now, like, we got a little protracted in episode 5 going to the expert. I kind of lost focus when we start talking more and more about drifts and dents and things like that, but I believe it's important. My takeaway, though, from that group, and Laura kind of hinted at this, is that for them, the only acceptable answer is yes, that she was run off the road, right? Yes would be a yes, but no means maybe next time it's yes, right? And I think that goes for Bob and Mike, too. They said, we're going to continue this investigation. It'll never be over until they can prove that the company had her killed in a highly opportunistic way. I think reasonable people can disagree on the likelihood, the extent of that. Like, again, they point out if she was a problem whistleblower, they could just fire her, right? And like, why wouldn't they do that? I mean,
because she would still talk.
Because she would still talk. But
she's
but
mouthy.
No one else would. But it comes out she's mouthy. These insolent women. But there's no rhyme or reason from it. But Toby's got an excellent point. Why does this live on in folklore? Because of the timing of it, Yeah. And also, like, if she were, to blow the whistle at the widget factory, nobody would give two fucks about this, right? The New York Times wouldn't be there. No one would remember it. It's the whole state of. And we have to remember, it's hard to remember, like, how big the anti-nuke movement was, right? And there were movies like The China Syndrome, and then, of course, Silkwood, talking about the dangers of nuclear power. And, like, it's so bad that today... Dark. As we're talking about ways to get greenhouse gas-free energy, nuclear power is emissions-free energy. It has its own other problems, and that's why it's not taken seriously. That's like how
it's taken seriously in Europe,
right? But that's just like how radioactive its legacy is, right? It just happened at such an important time. But again, I think people can disagree on what is there to find. Could both these things be true, that they were being tailed? I mean, there's no physical evidence that she got run off the road, Rebecca Lavoie, but
there's also no evidence she didn't.
Okay, see, like, now that's you're proving my point. You just proved my point. Yeah, all right.
It doesn't not matter, I guess I would say. I mean, they talk about how this whole thing with the bumper came in late, right? So they basically were going to have a podcast that is this podcast, but without the bumper, in which case they turn up some stuff, but nothing that seems potentially game changing, I guess. And I think the bumper is the chance for a game changer. And they certainly like leave you that impression after the 4th episode. And then it happens as like, it's sort of underwhelming. But without that, I just don't really know what you have other than two guys who are connected to the story, sort of retelling the story with like little tiny additions here and there that are probably of more interest to people who are like really into that story than they are to people like me who are coming into it pretty cold, because it just kind of feels like, oh, this is something that they didn't know until now. It doesn't seem like it's that much more important than other stuff you've been talking about. So I don't think you always need to come to a conclusion. I think we've certainly reviewed other podcasts and shows where the journey is interesting enough, or the facts of the case are interesting enough, or just the sheer fact that it's so hard to solve given all that you know about it is interesting enough. In this particular case, at the end, I was just like, I guess I sort of echoed the thoughts of all those people at the end, like the family members and stuff, were like, well, we're disappointed. We really thank you for all the work you've done. We really appreciate it. But at the same time, and I kind of felt that way a little bit at the end of the podcast, which is like, I'm glad you did all this work. You clearly are trying to document as much as possible. But in the end, like, did I feel differently about the case than I did after they kind of summarized it in episode 1? It's like, I don't know if I really did. I just feel like I got like a few little details kind of filled in along the way. Although they're very nice, companionable people. So it wasn't like hard to listen to or anything.
Hey, everybody, it's Rob Lowe here. If you haven't heard, I have a podcast that's called Literally with Rob Lowe. And basically, it's conversations I've had that really make you feel like you're pulling up a chair at an intimate dinner between myself and people that I admire, like Aaron Sorkin or Tiffany Haddish, Demi Moore, Chris Pratt, Michael J. Fox, There are new episodes out every Thursday, so subscribe, please, and listen wherever you get your podcasts.
From the makers of Rice-A-Roni comes Macaroni, a creamy, delicious boxed mac and cheese that's not just good, it's cheesy good. Macaroni will please even the pickiest eaters with 2 magnificent flavors that will melt your heart, creamy cheddar and creamy white cheddar. If you love cheese, you'll love Macaroni by the makers of Rice-A-Roni. If you don't love cheese, well, that's just unbelievable. Try Macaroni. It's cheesy good.
Macaroni, the San Francisco treat.
Looking for a meaningful holiday gift that can help deepen connections and even provide cognitive benefits? Choose Rosetta Stone. Rosetta Stone offers immersive language learning courses designed for long-term retention. Flexible learning options fit into busy schedules, and there's even a feature that provides pronunciation feedback. Today, listeners can visit rosettastone.com/pod50 to take advantage of an incredible holiday special on Rosetta Stone's lifetime membership. That's unlimited access to 25 language courses for the rest of your life. Redeem your holiday offer now at rosettastone.com/pod50.
The holidays are all about sharing with family. Meals, couches, stories, grandma's secret pecan pie recipe. And now you can also share a cart with Instacart's family carts. Everyone can add what they want to one group cart from wherever they are. So you don't have to go from room to room to find out who wants cranberry sauce, or whether you should get mini marshmallows for the yams, or collecting votes for sugar cookies versus shortbread. Just share a cart, and then share the meals and the moments. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes, plus enjoy free delivery on your first 3 orders. Service fees and terms apply.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out Radioactive, the Karen Silkwood Mystery? It's a new podcast. Laura Bricker, thumbs up or thumbs down for this podcast?
I'm going mild thumbs up with this podcast. The 2 hosts are like old school radio guys. So I'm like, they are never going to be able to do a podcast. You know what? I think they did a great job coming into this. Like, I followed this. I didn't, you know me, I get lost in all the stories because people don't give me enough signposting and I don't know who's doing anything.
These boomers are never going to get this podcast done, says Laura Bricker.
I was like, these guys, they're like, I don't know how old they are, but I was like, we'll see how they do.
Be at their Romeo's gathering?
Retired old men eating out.
No.
But I was like, I kind of appreciated the fact that these guys who you hear in the opening scene, like, and I don't think it's like a huge spoiler, like one guy's like out, they're like some sort of hostage situation and they've been friends ever since. And this is the story that got away, that they, at the time when they were young reporters, they were not equipped to follow up on. And they follow up and you find out there's a lot of other people that are also equally committed to this story. I think my frustration is that it ends up not going where I thought it was going to go, but I liked the cast of characters. We had all the right people there. It was interesting. Anytime you have a nuclear power plant and some conspiracy theories, you know there's going to be some interesting stories to be heard. You know, secret tapes, there's a lot in there that was interesting. But it was just, for me, there was some parts of the promise of what was going to happen versus what actually happened that left me a little frustrated. So that's why I'm only a mild thumbs up.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for Radioactive, the Karen Silkwood Mystery?
Yeah, I'm having a tough time with this one. I guess I'll give it a mild thumbs up because I kind of enjoyed listening to it. But as far as a podcast as a whole and kind of what it does and what you end up with, I don't think that was as successful as just sort of the feel of the 2 hosts, and they're telling the story and they're doing this sort of reinvestigation. I didn't know much about the Karen Silkwood story. It's super interesting, her story. So if you haven't heard much about her story, like, that part is really good. And in some ways it feels like kind of a quest type thing where these 2 guys are trying to figure out about this case that wasn't solved. And they were journalists who covered it and they want to try and bring some resolution to it. But in the end, I don't know. I mean, it's hard to talk much further without spoiling something. But when it was over, I just kind of felt like the total did not equal the sum of the parts. And, you know, I just wish there'd been a little something more so that at the end of it, you could make kind of sense of what you'd listen to rather than sort of following the process and then having the process end at a certain resolution. You know, not every podcast has to be introspective or looking at itself, but I think in this case, it really could have used it because some other elements of what would have made it more successful were missing.
Kevin Flynn.
I'm going thumbs up. You know, we've had a series of, we'll call them conspiracy subgenre true crime podcasts. And those are always very difficult because, like with other kinds of cold cases, what kind of resolution can you expect? I think we've got two really sympathetic hosts here. These are old school reporters, and Rebecca keeps making fun of them for being old, but
no,
I don't.
I'm not actually making fun of them. I'm just pointing out the fact that
I don't know. I think the rest of us think
in
that
my review, I'll address this.
But look, they do solid reporting. They go down every possible investigative path that you can, certainly compared to like any of these recent conspiracy shows that we've looked at. So in the end, if you think about like what is the satisfying conclusion, is what is the satisfying answer to the mystery of Karen Silkwood? In the end, I think we'll just say, because this isn't a spoiler, at the end, one of the things her daughter says is that the way she died is not as important as to what she accomplished as a whistleblower, as someone who was prominent labor activist whose legacy lives on much longer than her time on this earth. And, she'll forever be known for what she accomplished as opposed to how she died. But there's still great questions to be answered there about how she died, and one has to decide if it's foul play or if it isn't, what is satisfying to you. Now, for me, the way they handled it, I give it a thumbs up.
I'm giving it a thumbs up as well, and I just want to address this because it's come up several times. I brought it up, let's be real. I love the hosts of this podcast. I actually think they're underutilized, and I agree with something Kevin said in the review, which is that we hear they've been friends for decades. We don't hear them being friends in the podcast. And if this is going to be like a shoe leather, going into somebody's garage, finding stuff. At one point, they find a bunch of files. They're like in a big room looking for files, and they find the files they're looking for. And it's like we hear a little bit of tape of them there, and I'm like, I wanted more of that. So I think this podcast would have been a much more enthusiastic thumbs up for me if we had gotten more of that. That being said, this is a thing that I go back to over and over and over again. This is a 50-year-old case, right? Almost 50 years old. And a lot of people have no idea what the fuck we're talking about when we say Karen Silkwood. And telling her story alone would have been a worthy thing to do. Trying to advance her story is an even more worthy thing to do. And I really enjoy listening to these two dudes trying to do that. So yeah, thumbs up for me for this podcast. That's going to do it for us. But before we go, Laura Bricker, do we have a cat of the week this week?
So this one comes to us from Fiona Reed. And this is a cat named Tommy, who is a bit of a celebrity in Shetland, one of my favorite places and one of my favorite book series adapted for television.
I want to go there so badly.
I want to go there and meet Tommy. So Tommy, he often wanders around the main street. He goes and he nips into shops for cuddles. He has his own bed in one of the town bars.
Nice.
He even has his own annual calendar, which raises money for local charities, including the food bank and cat protection. And she seems to think he may have met Jimmy Perez back in the day, also my favorite Shetland TV detective. So Tommy the cat, he reminds me of Frankie the cat in Exeter, who also wanders around town and goes in places and has his own Facebook page. But he's in Shetland, so he's so much cooler.
Yeah, of course, we're talking about Anne Cleeves, great mystery writer who has several series at all times going on. All right, Laura Bricker, if folks want to reach out to you and share their love for Jimmy Perez, how can they find you online?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Blue Sky and Instagram and sometimes over on the Twitter.
What about you, Toby? How can you be found?
At Toby Ball NH. Just find me on Blue Sky.
Kevin?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn. And the P stands for plutonium.
But on Blue Sky, you're just Kevin Flynn.
I'm just Kevin Flynn.
Yeah.
Just look for Kevin Flynn.
You can find me everywhere at Reb Lavoie. Follow me on Instagram to see my dogs. Follow me on Blue Sky to interact with me. Follow me on Twitter if you're interested in Karen Reed. You can follow the show everywhere at Crime Writers on all the platforms, but mostly I encourage you to join our Facebook group. The people there are rad, nice, mature, and if they're not, I kick them out. Just go to Facebook. There's a link there on how to join the group on our page. Our theme song was composed and performed by Ty Gibbons. Our editor is the wonderful Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is sitting next to me wearing plaid, and his name is Kevin.
Mm-hmm.
This show was recorded in Studio C, The Closet, in our New Hampshire basement, where we also scrub each other down in the shower with harsh brushes and laundry detergent. It's hot. On behalf of all the Crime Writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later. Kevin, does that end our business section?
Only if I can bend over. That's horrible.
Go
That's
right
horrible.
for it, I guess.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Yeah, I know. And they get the seals. The seals were getting sucked into the fans.
What?
Yeah, the seals are always getting. It's very.
The
When I was at the
intake
newspaper.
right.
Yeah, when I was
really?
at the
Oh,
newspaper,
God.
it was always a story when the seals were getting whacked at the nuke plant. But
Seals getting whacked at the nuke plant. Okay.
I'm sorry. That was very insensitive.
It's all right. It's all right. They're already dead. We're not killing them right now.
There's not that many seals listen to us anyway.
Yeah.
Partners in Crime Media.
From the makers of Rice-A-Roni comes Macaroni, a creamy, delicious boxed mac and cheese that's not just good, it's cheesy good. Macaroni will please even the pickiest eaters with 2 magnificent flavors that will melt your heart, creamy cheddar and creamy white cheddar. If you love cheese, you'll love Macaroni by the makers of Rice-A-Roni. If you don't love cheese, well, that's just unbelievable. Try Macaroni. It's cheesy good.
Macaroni, the San Francisco treat.